In this video, we will start setting up our package, and we will start setting up our linter, formatter, talk about how to use git commit messages to generate a changelog, and set up git hooks to execute some tasks on git actions. So first, let's clone the repository and recap what files we have so far. At the moment, we have a .github folder that contains the issue templates and issue forms, the pull request templates, and the code of conduct. Next, we have a .gitignore file that corresponds to the node gitignore that you can find on GitHub. We have the MIT license that we chose, and finally our README file. So let's open the terminal and run npm init to initialize the npm package. Running npm init, we are prompted to specify every information about the package. It starts with the package name, which will be the same as the name of the repo for us. Then the version, we are going to use semantic versioning for our package, starting with 1.0.0. The description is a copy of the one we wrote on GitHub for the repository. Now we need to specify the entry point. The entry point is essentially the file that will be used when someone requires your package. It means that when someone downloads the npm package and uses the code const mode equal require and then your package name, the file that is required is the entry point that you have specified in the package.json. If we take this file as an example, I got import selector parser from post.css selector parser. So if I essentially click on this, I will see that it's installed from the node module. So you got node module slash post.css selector parser. And just going through it and just looking at its package.json, you got the entry point. The entry point is specified by main here. And so main is pointing to dist index.js. If we look at dist index.js, this is a file that was specified to be the entry point and contains the code. The code has gone through some processing as well here. So the parser function is what is exported by default. So when I'm essentially saying import selector parser from post.css selector parser, this corresponds to the default, which corresponds to the parser function. Because we are going to use a build tool that will transform our source files and create our final files into a library, we can specify the path of the build file and not our source file. The file will be in the lib directory, and the file will essentially be named post.css debug borders.js, which is the same as our package name. For the test command, we are going to use Jest. Jest is a testing library that has been created by Facebook and contains everything you need to test JavaScript projects and applications. It includes an assertion library and can create the test coverage report and has a test runner. It is popular, so it has good support for TypeScript. It also has good extensions for editors and IDE. The rest of the information prompted is quite self-explanatory. You got a link to the Git repository, a list of keywords that will be used for search on NPM, information about the author of the package, the license type, which is MIT in our situation. So now let's start by initializing a TypeScript project. We first need to add TypeScript as a dependency. We can add it as a dependency using this command line and then run npx tsc init. This will create a tsconfig.json file. The tsconfig.json file contains the configuration used by TypeScript to compile your code. The file generated contains the option commented, so you have visibility on the different options available. For our project, we are going to modify this default configuration a tiny bit. The target is the version of JavaScript you want to build for. If you set ES5 as a target, new language features will be transformed into old code to work with the environment compatible with ES5. We want to support Node version 14 or superior, which corresponds to ES 2019. If we put ES 2020, some of the code might be too recent for Node 14 and will not be supported. Next is the lib. I want to be able to use ESNext, and I'm expecting to have ESNext types to be available in this project. I set allow.js to false and declaration to true. Declaration is to generate the corresponding .d.ts file. This file will contain the types for our project and will provide typings for the developers using our library. They will get auto-completion and everything you would expect if you had the TypeScript project on your computer. Next, let's talk about linting. To lint our project, we're going to use ESLint, which is a really popular JavaScript linter. It will help you analyze your code and prevent mistakes based on the rules you want to enforce. ESLint is compatible with TypeScript. It is quite extensible, as a lot of plugins to work with specific frameworks and adds additional rules and features to it. You also can use a configuration created by someone else by just downloading a ESLint configuration on NPM and then extending it in your configuration. The most popular configuration is probably ESLint Airbnb. You might have come across it and be tempted to use it here to create an NPM package. You can do it, but before you do, you need to understand Airbnb has created ESLint Airbnb for their own use cases. And while some of the rules make sense for them, they might not always make sense for you. For example, you can see rules disallowing the usage of JavaScript features, such as for off, because its transformation to ES5 is heavy, which will add a lot of code. That specific reason is not relevant for us. We are building a package for Node.js and we are not targeting ES5. For this reason, I use a light configuration using recommended rules. It contains a lot of rules to avoid mistakes, but those rules tend to be quite obvious and not opinionated. Rules like removing unused variables are difficult to argue against, but enforcing semicolon might lead to arguments. So let's add our necessary dev dependencies, which are TypeScript ESLint plugin, the TypeScript ESLint parser, and ESLint itself. Next, we need to create a .eslint rc.js file and add the configuration. The configuration contains information about the environment of our project. We are using Jest, so we expect global variables like describe, test, it to be defined. We do not want those to trigger errors. We are in a Node.js environment and it has similar implication as Jest. There are some global variables that we expect to be present. Next, we need to change the parser. We don't want ESLint to parse JavaScript code, but we want it to parse TypeScript. We add the plugin for TypeScript and then we extend the configuration we want. In this situation, I'm extending ESLint recommended and the TypeScript ESLint recommended. The TypeScript recommended configuration will add TypeScript specific rules. Now I'm going to create a script in the package.json file to run ESLint with our configuration, which this command. And what that line is doing is essentially running ESLint in our directory, scanning all the .ts files and ignoring every file that corresponds to what is in the .gitignore. The fix is an option that will automatically fix errors when it's possible. So now to format our code, we're going to use Prettier. For simplicity, I'm using the default configuration for Prettier, which essentially is running Prettier without any options. Using a formatter is really ideal because you don't need to be preoccupied with a range of warning and issues that ESLint could warn you about. Everything related to styling, such as semicolons, spaces, is not something you really would need to take time to review when looking at a pull request. To use Prettier, you need to add it as a dev dependency with this command, and you can add a NPM script to your package.json as well. So another document that you can add to your project is a changelog. And a changelog is a document describing the changes that you made to the library over time. So for each new version, the document will tell what has been added, removed, bugs that has been fixed, and any breaking changes. Writing a changelog can be quite a manual process, but there is a way to automate it almost completely. And to do that, we need to find a way to provide all of those information during our development and extract that information after to create our changelog file. Those information will be provided in the commit messages. We will have basically a convention for our commit messages that will be consistent and allow us to get the information we need. The convention we are using is called the Angular convention because it was popularized by the JavaScript framework Angular. You can find more information about the convention on a website called conventionalcommits.org. To summarize what the convention is about, we add a title to our Git message specifying if we are fixing an issue or if we add a feature or if we are refactoring or adding a test or working on a build. And then we can run a script that will retrieve the content of the Git messages and extract all of those informations. The script we are using is called conventional changelog CLI. We can add it to our dev dependencies and then add an NPM script to generate our changelog. Now we can enforce the convention with a script via git hooks. The scripts verify that you are writing a git commit message properly. The script is written in TypeScript and we will need to use tsnode to execute it. So let's add tsnode to our dependency and let's set up the git hooks. At that moment, we have to run the lint command and the format command manually. If we forget to do it before we push, at this stage, the code will reach the main branch without failing. One important step to automate the process is to add git hooks. And git hooks will execute a script when you run some git commands. We want to execute npm run lint and npm run format when I push to the repository. And we want to ensure that our script will be executed to verify that the git commit message conforms to our convention. To do that, there is an NPM package that is called Husky, and you can just go on their website to just see how to install Husky. And that concludes the first part of setting up our project. Next, we will go through the rollup configurations and talk about the different formats to build our library.